Welcome back to another episode of Have You Heard? Today, we're going to be talking all things Google Ads. And I've brought here with me today, Joey, who's our paid media director at The Social Shepherd.
Hello, I'm back again.
Yeah, we've brought you back again and many more times ahead in the future as well. And I know, so obviously today we're going to be talking about Google Ads. As an agency, The Social Shepherd, that we represent and work for, you know, come in the name, says social. It sort of says it on the tin. We're a social first agency in a sort of everything we do, but paid search and Google Ads is actually one thing that's massively come on for us. And we spend around 500 plus K a month, obviously depending on the month, you know, going into Q4, I expect that to massively rise. But we've had a lot of learnings from those Google Ads and managing that amount of spend across the various amount of clients. And I think it's 60% of our clients we manage both paid social for and paid search, especially clients that come to us for paid media and more performance marketing part of our services. So Joey, in terms of Google Ads, what things have we learned? I know that you've obviously been in the industry for 5+ years now across PPC and search.
Yeah.
So a lot has changed in that time.
It's crazy how much things have changed in that time. You know, for those who haven't listened to the podcast before, so prior to myself coming to The Social Shepherd, I was another agency that was more PPC focused. So that's quite, you know, where quite a lot of my background lies. Yeah. Back in the days then, I say back in the days, only 5 years ago now, but things were very manual in the way that you used to run activity on Google Ads. You know, you would be building out keywords and manually upweighting and downweighting bids throughout your day. That was kind of your task, especially when you come in as an exec. That's like one of the tasks that you're kind of assigned to do, to make sure that you're being really competitive in the auction, or, you know, as much as you can be. And back then you had metrics within the ad account, such as average position. So you could see exactly where you sat in terms of the position in the search rankings. And you could upweight and downweight bids based on that, and obviously have a look where your competition is sitting as well. And it all got a bit fun and games because you could tell there was someone on the other end of the competitor's computer, and they would be there always, you know, upweighting, downweighting bids in line with what you were doing.
Almost
as well.
Feels like a video game.
Literally. But obviously things have massively changed since then. You know, AI's got much more powerful. Things are becoming much more automated. And we've got the likes of campaigns such as Performance Max coming into the fray, which massively take, quite a lot of time off of our plates in terms of physical bid management that we don't have to do anymore because of the way that the algorithm automatically dictates where the budget goes. So that's kind of one of the massive changes that's really kind of changed the way that we look and manage PPC accounts. Yeah. I think particularly over the last 2 years, that's become more prominent, as I said, with Performance Max really becoming a main campaign type that I know, we've been utilizing a lot across all of our Google Ads accounts. And, you know, with the Performance Max activity, you're bringing all of Google's networks that it's got available to it, you know, into play in terms of what you can bid on. And also, you know, what type of ads that are being put out off the back end of it.
Are we predominantly going after like target ROAS as like an objective? I guess that has obviously some automation as a part of that because it's taking in terms of cost per acquisition and the revenue.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, the bidding strategy side of things is really when one of the things that massively changed as I was at my previous agency, because it really shifted from that manual side of things, you know, with, you know, target CPA and target ROAS coming into play. And, you know, Google at the time were really pushing the new automated bidding strategies. Back then, you know, they probably weren't as good as the manual bidding, but, you know, Google didn't have as much data behind it in terms of the amount that it was powering the algorithm. So, you know, the more time's developed, the more powerful those bidding strategies have become. And I couldn't even managing a Google Ads account now with manual bidding. It just, one, wouldn't work as well, because you just don't have as much flexibility to play with in terms of, you know, where you're upweighting and downweighting bids. But also like the visibility side of things has massively decreased. Like I said, we used to have the metric that was called average position. Google got rid of that 3-4 years ago, and you don't have access to that anymore, which is one of the main things that we used to benchmark off when changing those bids and manually upweighting and downweighting them. So that's kind of gone now. And so you really do have to rely on the automatic and automated bidding strategies to be able to kind of drive performance forward. But they are also really good. They're really powerful, and it gives you a lot of dynamism, especially when you're trying to scale budgets, in terms of making sure that you're still hitting your targets with the increase in spend going through it. And, they learn really quickly. I think we've had some really big success stories, since I've been working for the company, across the team, and certainly as we've been onboarding more Google Ads clients, where we've managed to scale from, be it 5, 10K onto Google Ads up to 70, 80, 90K. Some instances where it's been sort of 10K up to 150, 200K a month through the platform. And you wouldn't have been able to do that using manual bidding, or it would be very difficult at least, and probably would have taken much longer than if you were to use, the automated bidding strategies that you've got access to.
And in terms of sort of manual search side on like exact phrase and broad match, have you seen a shift there? Are we still just doing exact and phrase? What's going on there?
So, I was always taught best practice was to use exact and phrase match. Now, back in the day, again, exact match was exactly the keywords that you would be bidding on. Google uses its automation now to slightly deviate to find kind of close references between the keywords that you're bidding on and other keywords that it thinks are going to be, relevant. And phrase match again, which, back in the day, you used to have 4 match types. So you used to have exact match, which was kind of the tightest knit targeting. You would have broad match modified, which is essentially if you were to have a phrase within within your keywords, let's say black shoes, it could be black men's shoes that it could match to. It could be black women's shoes. You could basically input any other keywords in and around those 2 keywords that you've got to be able to match to a term. Phrase match has kind of taken over from that. It did exist back then. Not many people used it, but it's kind of Google's middle ground now in terms of trying to broaden your search a little bit, but not trying to deviate too much away from the keywords that you're bidding on to still keep it relevant. Broad match goes even further than that, and you're really casting the net quite wide in terms of what Google can match to in terms of the keywords. So it's finding close references to your keywords, but they're not always necessarily that closely matched to. So
at what point do you think brands should start testing with broad match? Is it a point where they've exhausted all other options and then that is the final?
I think that's the point that we're kind of coming to, certainly on a couple of ad accounts that we're managing, where we have managed to scale them. And we're kind of hitting potentially a peak in terms of the keywords that we're using with exact and phrase match, and actually potentially bringing, broad match into the fray to try and broaden out and to try and grab those extra, maybe longer tail searches that we hadn't thought of, or any other searches that we might not have thought of within our current ad structure to be able to go out and target with. But that being said, you've got to be so careful with broad match because it's so wild with some of the things it can match to. It's certainly a lot better than it used to be, because it used to be crazy, some of the things that it used to match to, and you used to waste an awful amount of budget on random key, search terms that just didn't make any sense to what, the product or, service offering that you had. But yeah, I think, the way that Google's going, I think we're going to get to a point anyway where you're only going to have broad match available to you anyway to be able to use, to bid on. So it's just going to be interesting to see where it goes. Obviously we've seen all of the announcements with Google's, improvements in AI and all of that kind of stuff. But, that's one of the things that we'll be keeping an eye on, but we'll be very much keeping the phrase exact match, campaign structure as our core, and then testing as and when we need to with broad match.
And as well as broad match keywords, what else sort of tactical advice would you be giving brands or clients or anything like that into scaling their activity if they're at that sort of crossroads of like struggling to find areas? What is there key areas that you would always, if you got fresh eyes onto an ad account that you'd be looking at straight away, or
I think
to scale?
I think you always want to make sure, especially if you're an e-commerce brand, is making sure that you're covering a few key areas. One of them is your shopping activity. You want to have a product feed running. You want to have shopping activity running, whether that's through manual shopping, whether that's through Performance Max. I think there's perks of running both. So making sure that you've definitely got some coverage within that network. Running manual search is also really important to make sure you've got some control over the keywords that you're bidding on. As we know, Performance Max is automated and there is limited control over what Google bids on from that side of things. And then finally, on top of that, is dynamic search ads, which we kind of use as a keyword plugging tool, essentially. So anything that Performance Max might not be picking up, anything that our manual search key terms might not be picking up, generally dynamic search will be picking up to make sure that we've kind of got the best amount of coverage across the board. So that's the core that you probably want to start with, and make sure you've got all of those built into your ad account. I think once you kind of hit a point where potentially you're then capping out in terms of your ad spend, and I'm really talking where you could be potentially be spending, hundreds of thousands a month. You can be starting to branch out into other channels. You've got the display network, the discovery network, and YouTube, which are 3 good core brand building and awareness building channels that you can start really kind of casting the net wide to kind of reach those wider audiences to introduce your brand to people that might not have heard it before. And I think that's where a bit of our social experience comes into play as well, because quite a lot of that knowledge that we have on that side of things, we can transfer across and use on those networks because it's a similar playing field, what we're working with. So I think that's probably, the areas that you definitely want to have covered within your Google Ads account.
And I guess even aside from Google specifically, you can translate everything you do across over to Bing and other search platforms, depending on where you are in the world as well. And obviously search as a whole spectrum of things is translating across social now as well, and how even Pinterest is used as a search platform, TikTok,
exactly. I think Bing's Microsoft Ads is always one that's kind of always brushed to the side a little bit. I think it depends on what product or service that you're offering, but certainly the demographic that sits within Bing it's generally a much older, wealthier demographic, and it's much more B2B focused as well. I think typically what we see is that offices, businesses, they will have Microsoft Edge as their default browsing option, which has Bing as the search engine. So by default, from that side of things, you're going to be getting access to quite a lot of businesses from a search perspective. So we've always found it work very well from that side of things, and also from that older demographic and wealthy demographic too. But it's always one to not discount. You should always definitely set up and test on it. It's not as powerful as Google. There's not enough volume as there is on Google. But if you manage it correctly in its own way, you can certainly get some success out of it.
Definitely. And is there anything else, sort of final words of advice that you give to sort of brand owners, marketing managers, performance marketing managers at the moment across Google, or even considerations?
I think one of the main things that we always see that kills performance in Google Ads accounts is limited by budget, which is essentially you get a little red marker come up on your campaigns that say, essentially your campaign is running out of budget throughout the course of the day. Now, budget management on Google is a bit more difficult than it is on Meta, because you don't set a daily budget and it kind of spends that exact amount every day. It can spend up to your daily budget and up to 100% over your daily budget, but it doesn't necessarily always spend your daily budget. So there's a lot of flexing and playing around you have to do with that. But certainly one of the things that kills performance is when it says limited by budget. And essentially what's happening there is your ad spend is kind of reaching a certain point in the day. It's hitting the daily budget, and then Google is obviously seeing that you've got no budget left, so they'll switch the campaign off. So you could, that could happen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you could miss out on a whole evening's worth of traffic, which could be quite highly converting, because you've not set your budgets properly. So that's a really, really important thing to make sure that you don't allow kind of any consistent limited by budget campaigns running. And you can alleviate that by either increasing your budget, and Google will give you recommendations of how much it thinks it can spend with your current cost caps that you've got set on your campaign. So whether that's your target CPA or target ROAS. Or the alternative is, if you need to, tighten up your budget, you want to make sure that it stays within there. You just need to tighten up your cost caps. So tighten up your target CPA or tighten up your target ROAS just to make sure that it sits within that daily budget and you're getting the full day's worth of ad spend running through the account.
What about other Google recommendations?
Oh, Google's auto apply recommendations. Oh, they're pushing it so hard at the moment, and it's so painful with some of the things that they ask you to put on. I've had so many calls with Google reps where they've asked me to put them on, and I've tested it, and then performance has kind of died slightly. So I think you always have to be careful with what you put on and what you test. Some of the things that they've got on there are really good in terms of the recommendations that they make, but some are a bit more rogue, so just be very careful which ones you tick.
Rogue?
I think I think it's ones that we've discussed before. I think particularly around like copy generation, because you can get Google to generate responsive search ads for you, where it will crawl your website content to find phrases that it can build into ad copy, which from a technical standpoint probably works quite well for Google because it's super relevant to what people are searching for and what's on your website, but doesn't necessarily always make sense when you've kind of got lots of different phrases dotted around in each of the different headlines and descriptions that you've got, and it doesn't really sound quite cohesive. So that's probably one of the main ones I'd watch out for. And also some of the like cost cap changes you can opt in for Google to automatically change your target CPA and your target ROAS, which I wouldn't recommend either, because again, there's some interesting rogue choices to try and make them, make you spend a bit more money. But on the whole, it's not too bad. But yeah, you've just got to be quite careful with some of the ones that you tick on there.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing all that insights there on Google Ads. And obviously, like you mentioned, been in the industry for 5+ years. So it's really good to hear all that. But if you've got any questions from anything about Google Ads related or even paid social, please do leave them in the comments below, as we'll be filming many more of these. Joe will be coming back, so we'll be sure to answer any questions that you have. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.